Hi lads, a special Irish-American history report here. I'm in a very blustery and windy Cumberland, Maryland, standing next to the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal. And what do I come across here but a Celtic cross that was actually put up by the Ancient Order of Hibernians in Allegheny County, Maryland in 2008 to commemorate the Irish who immigrated and built the canal that you see behind me. The Chesapeake and Ohio Canal was a monumental achievement in the early 1800s in the United States. It was built to bring coal and other natural resources from the western side of the Alleghenies over to the eastern seaboard, to cities like Washington and Baltimore, to help fuel the Industrial Revolution. But it was a huge, huge undertaking of labor. And so the builders of the canal imported Irish workers, Irish immigrants from Ireland to come here and build this canal. This is in the 1820s. This is before the big wave of Irish immigration came with the Great Hunger in the 1840s, early 1850s. There was this other wave of immigration where the Irish workers were brought out from Ireland specifically to build the canal that you see behind me. An interesting fact here is this is Cumberland, Maryland. Maryland, at the time of the building of this canal, was a slave-holding state. People forget that because Maryland did not secede with the Confederacy during the Civil War. They stayed with the Union, with the United States, but they were a slave-holding state. So the question might be asked of, you have this intense labor that is required to build the canal. You have enslaved human beings. Why didn't they use enslaved people to build the canal? Why do they go to Ireland and import Irish immigrants? Well, the thing about it is that it was actually cheaper in their minds, the builders of the canal, to hire and import Irish workers than it was to use the enslaved human beings. Because in this grotesque mentality, an enslaved person, an African-American enslaved person, was a capital investment. So essentially they were a commodity, and you didn't want to waste your capital on such a dangerous project as building the canal. So what they did was they imported these Irish immigrants because they weren't a capital. Yes, you had to pay them a wage. Yes, they had a handful of more rights than the enslaved African Americans. But if they died, if they got killed here, move on, forget about it. You hadn't lost capital. That's how grotesque that slave-holding mentality before the American Civil War was. But that is also the reason why waves of immigrants from Ireland came and settled in this area and built the canal behind me. This was a very, very difficult life. And it really makes you wonder how bad life was back home in Ireland, that this was an attractive proposition, that people were that desperate that they would come here and that they would work. It was hard labor. It was dangerous labor. And it was subject to so many disease outbreaks. In 1832, there was a massive cholera outbreak that killed hundreds of these Irish laborers. If you follow the canal, we're here in Cumberland, this is the terminus of the canal, the western terminus, but if you follow it up and down, there are unmarked graves of Irish workers. There's Irish workers who built it that go up and down this area. And that's the reason why the AOH brothers of Allegheny County, Maryland decided in 2008 to actually put up this monument. Part of it was just simply so that those Irish workers would actually have a monument, have some place to remember. And so that's what we're doing here today. Another aspect of this is the amount of discrimination that the Irish workers faced. around this exact same time that these workers were being imported to labor, there was a thing called the Carmelite riot in Baltimore. Now you may think, what a Carmelite riot? That sounds really weird. But what happened was that there was such anger and such hostility towards the Irish immigrants that conspiracy theories spread. Now, one of these conspiracy theories was that the Carmelite convent in Baltimore was kidnapping good Protestant American women and smuggling them in to the convent. Now, needless to say, all of this was complete and total nonsense, but it led to a 3-day siege of the Carmelite convent in Baltimore. Unfortunately, in Baltimore, the mayor actually rallied to the defense of the immigrants and actually was able to preserve the convent, and it wasn't burnt down, but there was a mob there ready to burn it down. So that's the kind of environment that our forefathers here faced. So not only were they treated like a commodity, not only were they considered disposable, not only were they considered more disposable than enslaved human being, as horrible as that is, they also, when they moved on from this, had to face that kind of cultural, that kind of political context. But fortunately for us, they stayed. They fought for their rights as Americans. And so many of us are the inheritors of that, are the descendants of that, as Irish Americans, that it's good that we remember that. It's good that we take time, that the brothers of at the AOH here in Allegheny County actually put up this monument so that we can remember that heritage and we can remember that history. So much of what we see in the United States was built by Irish immigrants, was built by Irish laborers. And this is one example of it, but it's not the only example of it. And we got examples in Pittsburgh, we got examples in New York, we got examples in Chicago. But it's an important thing to remember, and everywhere you go, there's always a little bit of Irish American history. And so that's another surprise Irish American history report. See you, fellas. Slán.